MSW Media.
The Department of Justice has established a $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund after Trump dropped his lawsuit against the IRS.
A former federal prosecutor has been indicted for sending herself copies of Volume 2 of Jack Smith's final report disguised as cake recipes.
A federal judge has dismissed the charges against Kilmar Ábrego García on vindictive and selective prosecution grounds.
And the Justice Department has dropped all remaining charges against the Broadview Six after a grand jury transcript showed gross misconduct. This is Unjustified. Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 70 of Unjustified. It's Sunday, May 24th, 2026. I'm Allison Gill.
And I am Andy McCabe. And Allison, we're going to dive right in because we got some miles to cover here today.
Yeah.
So last week, you will recall, we briefly mentioned a potential forthcoming $1.8 billion slush fund that the DOJ is calling a settlement between Trump, his sons, and the IRS. And we said last week that we'd wait until this week to see what unfolded. And a lot has happened. My God, the country's on fire over this, as it should be.
Yeah.
So it's a story that's been dominating the headlines all week. And of course, since we recorded our last episode, Donald Trump filed a notice to the court that he was dropping his $10 billion lawsuit. Now, he didn't need to ask for permission to do this because the IRS never answered his complaint. And so that allowed him to unilaterally drop the case. He made no mention in his notice of any sort of a settlement.
Yeah. And after that, the judge noticed that. She closed the case, right?
Right.
But she made mention of the fact that there was zero mentions of any settlement, no terms of any settlement in the notice, and that there's no settlement of record. So whatever the Department of Justice would do next would not be a settlement of that case that she just closed. That was her purpose in saying that. And then NBC reported that the Justice Department announced last Monday that it was in fact establishing a $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund after Trump moved to dismiss a $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS over his leaked tax returns. And again, the article here says, NBC says that Trump moved to dismiss his case, but he didn't. Moving requires permission.
That's right.
He just filed notice. He noticed the court. So a move, he didn't move. That didn't happen here. But regardless, they go on to say, Justice Department officials announced that Trump and his co-plaintiffs would drop their IRS lawsuit, as well as their other claims of damages, the one in connection with the 2022 search of Mar-a-Lago, his Florida home, and the one that he was filing for damages in the Russian collusion scandal, all that, the hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And he was dropping all those claims in exchange for creating the fund, which the Justice Department said set up a, quote, systematic process to hear and redress claims of others who suffered weaponization and lawfare.
Yeah, so the 1.776, and if that number sounds familiar, yes, it is. It's been picked for promotional value, I'm sure. $1.776 billion available for the fund was based upon the projected valuation of future claimants' claims, according to the Justice Department.
Sure.
Now, yeah, right. I'd love to see the math. I want to see the work. Show your work on the paper.
Yeah.
Like in school, I want to see how they calculated that.
Yeah, and Public Citizen has filed a Freedom of Information Act request for that very thing.
Nice. Yeah. Okay, Trump was speaking to reporters on Monday afternoon, and he said the fund was meant to reimburse, quote, people that were horribly treated, adding that he wasn't involved in the fund's creation. Yeah, I'm sure he didn't know anything about it.
Mm.
Todd Blanche released the settlement document, but then amended it the following day. The Associated Press reports, on Tuesday, the Internal Revenue Service agreed to drop all pending probes of Trump over whether he's paid his fair share of taxes to settle a lawsuit brought by the president over a leak of his tax returns. Now, that could include, assuming it was ongoing, a long-standing audit into a technique that Trump reportedly used to avoid paying taxes years ago that could have hit him with an estimated $100 million bill if the IRS found wrongdoing.
So he kind of pardoned himself.
Yep, he did. But it doesn't end there, does it?
No. But tax experts, by the way, say that grant of immunity is shocking in the breadth of protection it offers the president and could undermine confidence in the fairness of the tax system. And by the way, nobody's bringing this up, but so I will. When John Gleeson filed his amicus brief against the $10 billion lawsuit, he talked about, hey, if you're thinking of settling this, we need to make sure the DOJ intends to comply with regulatory requirements and to account for limitations on the relief. And there's certain rules that you have to follow when you settle stuff, including 26 U.S. Code 7217A that makes it unlawful for executive officials to request any officer or employee of the IRS to terminate an audit of any particular taxpayer with respect to the tax liability of such taxpayer. Now, John Gleeson didn't say with respect to Trump and his audits, but I think he put that in there because he knew this was probably going to happen.
I think it would fit. Yep.
Yeah. So here's a quote. This is an unprecedented remedy. That's former IRS Commissioner Daniel Werfel, noting that Trump should be treated like every other tax-paying American. Quote, people expect the same tax rules and enforcement framework to apply to everybody. But that's not all. Like you said, the creation of this fund ruffled a lot of feathers in Congress on both sides of the aisle. In fact, Republicans were so mad about this that after a very contentious meeting on the Hill with Todd Blanche, in which at least 25 Senate Republicans yelled at Todd Blanche for setting up the fund without Congress, they all packed up and left town without funding ICE and Customs and Border Protection. So
we're so mad we're going on vacation.
Yeah, they couldn't get because they're funding their reconciliation bill to fund ICE and Customs and Border Protection because Democrats refuse to do so because it falls under the jurisdiction of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So does this weaponization fund. And a lot of people were wanting to put restrictions on it or include laws about this fund in the budget reconciliation bill. And they couldn't. It was like, forget it. And they all just went home.
Pooh. Somebody get my driver and tell him to take me to the airport. I'm ready to go to Cabo. Yeah, I mean, it's just hilarious to me. Like, this is what passes for a fight in Congress. Stomping your feet and shaking your fist as you walk out the door on vacation. Well done, gentlemen.
Now, Ted Cruz, by the way, somebody just sent this to me, apparently said on his podcast, quote, there were fireworks at an epic level. This is about that meeting. And I got to say it's one of the roughest meetings I've seen in my entire time in the Senate. Fiery does not begin to cut it. They were screaming at the acting attorney general. These are Republicans. This was the Republican Senate caucus.
I mean, I'm glad, but wow. What is it? How many years has it been? What has it taken to wake them up? This, apparently.
If only you belong to some sort of legislative body that could pass a law to block the fund.
Anyway, well, okay, so this reporting comes from The Independent. President Donald Trump lashed out at his Republican colleagues in the Senate who left the Hill this week without funding the president's signature immigration agenda after widespread opposition to his $1.8 billion slush fund. In a furious Friday Truth Social post, the president hit out at North Carolina Senator Thom Tillis, a soon retiring Republican, who has broken from Trump on various matters, including the newly formed Anti-weaponization Fund. Referring to Tillis as a weak and ineffective senator, Trump accused Tillis of pushing back against him in retaliation for refusing to endorse him. I don't think that's what it was about, Don. I don't think so. I think it was about the graft and corruption, but that's just my guess.
Our Beans Talk episode on Friday was called Stupid on Stilts, which is what Thom Tillis called this weaponization fund.
Nice.
Quote, the media said this is Trump. The media said how brave he was to take me on, but he wasn't brave. He was just the opposite. He was a quitter. Now he can have all the fun he wants for a few months with some of his rhino friends, screwing the Republican Party. In the end, it will only get bigger and better and stronger than ever before. All right. Lawmakers headed home early ahead of Memorial Day weekend after hitting an impasse over the Justice Department's newly created fund, which would allow people who believe they were unfairly prosecuted to obtain monetary relief from taxpayers.
Many have raised concerns that the fund would give people, such as the January 6 rioters pardoned by Trump, the chance to seek money from the government, despite once violently attacking the Capitol. Yes, that's them. That's the same people who tried to overturn the government. They're now going to be getting that money.
But I was told it was a peaceful protest and that it was caused by 26 FBI agents and liberals. So how would they possibly get money for this?
They were hugging the cops. It was a day of love. No. Okay, so that includes Republicans such as Tillis, who called the fund stupid on stilts, Senator Mitch McConnell, who referred to it as utterly stupid, and Senator Bill Cassidy, who called it a slush fund. Imagine that a fund that is set up to compensate people who assaulted Capitol police officers and other responding agencies, right? Tillis said on Wednesday. Yeah, right, exactly.
That's exactly it. Stupid on stilts. Now, there have been a few lawsuits filed, including one by former Capitol Police officer, our friend Harry Dunn, and Metropolitan Police Department officer, our friend Danny Hodges. That lawsuit was filed by Brendan Ballou in the District of Columbia. And I will be speaking with Harry Dunn and Brendan today on the breakdown over on the Midas Touch podcast at noon.
Nice.
Now, Crew has also filed a lawsuit to dissolve the fund. Common Cause has filed a lawsuit in the Eastern District of Virginia. Jamie Raskin has introduced legislation to stop it. Multiple people have said they will file claims, including Mark Caputo and Michael Cohen. Jim Acosta says he should be entitled to anti-weaponization money because Donald Trump yanked his press pass during his first term. And then there's this reporting from Ryan Riley at NBC. Quote, progressive podcaster Allison Gill, a former Department of Veterans Affairs employee forced out of her job over her Mueller, She Wrote podcast, said she filed a claim to Blanche this week. She's asking for $8.647 million, a seeming reference to the 8647 Seashells Instagram photo that the Trump administration used to charge former FBI Director James Comey because the Trump administration asserts 8647 is a threat against Trump. Comey joked this week on CNN he guessed he'd be in line for a payout from the fund, saying, I hope I'll be ahead of those who savagely beat police officers and sacked the Capitol. And we'll keep an eye on all of this going forward. And I just want to say, much like Todd Blanche saying the 1776 is just a valuation of potential claims.
Right.
My $8.647 million is got nothing to do with anything other than that's my calculations on back pay, forward pay, future pay, and lost pension and wages and punitive.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think I need to start scraping together my receipts to slide in there with a claim on my own.
Yeah, are you going to file?
I have already been talking to my lawyer about it, so I have not done it yet. But stay tuned. Stay tuned, everyone,
and stay tuned. I will also be filing a lawsuit against this fund coming up this week, and I'll keep you posted on that. So that's a little breaking news, I can tell you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a future in which Todd Blanche gets investigated for public corruption. I think if Todd, particularly if he becomes the Attorney General of the United States, this Todd Blanche, using his position of trust, his public position of trust as a public official, receiving pecuniary gain for doing that. And how can you characterize this as anything other than a bribe to another public official, that being the President of the United States? Maybe not one that goes directly in his pocket, but one that certainly is to his benefit. So I don't know. I'm just theorizing here. I'm just an investigator. That's what I do. So that's my hope for the future.
It's what we call a clue, as
could
they
be
like to say in the business.
Could be.
But, a $1.776 billion bribe makes sense because Todd Blanche could be in deep trouble over our next story. And we're going to talk about that after this break. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back. Rarely do we have some amazing, great, and incredible news to report here on the Unjustified podcast, but we do today. Great news from CBS. A federal judge, Crenshaw in Tennessee, tossed out an indictment charging Kilmar Ábrego García, a Salvadoran man mistakenly deported by the Trump administration last year, with human smuggling. U.S. District Judge Waverly Crenshaw granted Ábrego García's effort to dismiss the criminal charges on the ground that the Justice Department's prosecution was vindictive. This is extremely rare to win a vindictive and selective prosecution motion. Crenshaw had already ruled that the Salvadoran man demonstrated the prosecution may be vindictive, which left it up to the government to rebut that presumption. But in his decision, the judge concluded that prosecutors failed to meet that burden. And this is all Todd Blanche's fault.
Yes, ma'am.
It's all his fault, because that presumption of vindictiveness that shifted the burden onto the government to prove they're not being vindictive was because Todd Blanche went on Fox News and said, yeah, we charged him because that Maryland judge, Judge Sines, wouldn't deport him.
Well done, Mr. Blanche. Okay, so the decision is a massive victory for Ábrego García, whose immigration case became a flashpoint in President Trump's sweeping immigration crackdown. Ábrego García was charged last year with 2 counts of human smuggling, stemming from a November 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee, where he was pulled over by State Highway Patrol and was found to have numerous people in his vehicle. He pleaded not guilty.
The indictment came after Ábrego García was removed from the United States in March of 2025 and flown to El Salvador. That was that middle of the night Judge Boasberg emergency hearing about the 2 planes that took off, and he ordered the planes to be turned around. Ábrego García was on one of them, but an immigration judge had granted Ábrego García a legal status that forbade immigration authorities from deporting him to his home country. And a Trump administration official acknowledged his removal to El Salvador was a mistake. Ábrego García filed a civil lawsuit in Maryland challenging his deportation, and a federal judge ordered the Trump administration in April of 2025 to facilitate his return back to the United States. The Department of Homeland Security, however, resisted doing so for months, but then returned him to the U.S. only after they filed these criminal charges.
He has since been intertwined in civil and criminal legal fights and held on separate occasions by federal authorities in Tennessee and immigration officials in Maryland. He's remained out of immigration custody for several months while his case is proceeded. Quote, "The court does not reach its conclusion lightly," Crenshaw wrote. The objective evidence here shows that absent Ábrego's successful lawsuit challenging his removal to El Salvador, the government would not have brought this prosecution. The executive branch closed its investigation on the November 2022 traffic stop. Only after Ábrego succeeded in vindicating his rights did the executive branch reopen that investigation.
Yeah, and in the criminal case brought in Tennessee, Ábrego García and his attorneys argued that he was unfairly targeted by the federal government because of the civil lawsuit that successfully challenged his removal to El Salvador. And during during a nearly 6-hour hearing in February, members of Ábrego García's defense team questioned 2 government witnesses on when the Justice Department decided to move to indict him and whether anybody at the White House, Justice Department, or Department of Homeland Security were directly involved in those discussions.
The U.S. attorney, who was then leading the prosecution, Robert McGuire, said he decided to bring charges years after the initial traffic stop because, quote, "the evidence pointed to Ábrego García having committed a crime." Such a detailed and specific answer. McGuire also insisted it was his decision to prosecute Ábrego García and no one else's, adding that no one instructed him to do so or directed him to seek an indictment. Careful, perjury leaking around the corner there. Look out. Ábrego García's legal team, however, showed internal emails from a high-level Justice Department official that suggested that there was significant interest in charging Ábrego García after he challenged his deportation, including one that referred to the case as a, quote, top priority. Oh, Mr. McGuire.
Oh, yeah. And that was Mr. Singh, who worked in Todd Blanche's office.
Look at that. Bummer.
In his opinion, the truth will out, right? In his opinion, Crenshaw said he found insufficient evidence of actual vindictiveness, but concluded that the government has failed to rebut the presumption of vindictiveness. Again, this is all Todd Blanche's fault. The record in the case, Crenshaw says, does not explain the government's change in position to remove Ábrego and not prosecute him, then prosecute and not remove him, adding there is a retaliatory taint that kicked off the renowned investigation into Ábrego García.
Yeah, the judge wrote that objective evidence comes close to showing that, but for Ábrego's lawsuit, the Justice Department would not have indicted him. Crenshaw wrote that statements by then Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and the involvement of Akash Singh, an Associate Deputy Attorney General, directly tie Main Justice, that's a quote, directly tie Main Justice to reopening of an investigation into the 2022 traffic stop in Tennessee in response to Ábrego Garcia's successful challenge of his deportation. Blanche is now the acting attorney general. Quote, the objective credible evidence shows that Maine Justice was involved in this investigation before McGuire, Crenshaw said, adding Singh's involvement in the case, quote, touched on everything from the timing of the indictment to the substance of potential charges. And let me just throw in here, Allison, very quickly, remind us what vindictive prosecution requires. It's not just you proving that the government prosecuted you because they don't like you. That's not enough. You have to prove that the government prosecuted you to force you to do something else that the government wanted you to do, right? So it's like if the government charges you with narcotics trafficking and you're like, I didn't do that, I'm going to go to trial. Then they come back and charge you with another narcotics trafficking and wire fraud and like add 20 more charges on top of you, just like using the criminal justice system to like break you, to make you stop resisting, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here.
Oh, it's
100%.
totally what happened here. But I think it's interesting that the emails back and forth didn't rise to vindictive prosecution. But like I said, because Todd Blanche said that stuff on Fox News and there was a presumption of vindictiveness, the burden shifted from Ábrego García having to prove it was vindictive to the government having to prove it was not. And they failed. That is why these charges are being dismissed. And it's so rare, again, like I said, to get one of these rulings. Now, I spoke with Mr. Ábrego's attorney. His name is Sean Hecker, and he submitted this statement to me. He said, Kilmar Ábrego García is a victim of a politicized, vindictive White House and its lawyers at what used to be an independent Justice Department. We are so pleased that he is a free man, justifiably so. As this administration continually chips away at our democracy, we remain grateful for an independent judiciary that will dispassionately apply binding precedent to the facts. So Todd Blanche could, he might have needed to send over a $1.776 billion gift to Donald Trump after he got this case thrown out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, it is what it is. Todd Blanche is engaged in the highest, most visible act of trying out for a job in the history of this country. And he's going to do anything humanly possible to get himself to get rid of the acting and become the permanent attorney general. And the irony of all this is that the latest step, which we talked about the first part of the show, the slush fund, might be the thing that actually kills the deal for him because he still has to get approved by the Senate. He's got to get confirmed if he's going to be the attorney general. And this thing may have made him unconfirmable.
That's a very good point.
How do you vote for this guy if you're screaming at him in a hearing and stomping out of the hill to go on vacation because he made you so mad? I don't feel like that's the best preparation for getting those senators to confirm you. But we'll see. We'll see how.
Yeah, they tend to fall in line. But now that you've got Tillis, Cassidy, who lost his primary after Trump went against him. And then you've got folks like Collins and McCabe. Cassidy actually bucked his vote on a war powers resolution and voted with the Democrats. So after 8 tries, they finally got a war powers resolution through. And then when it went to the House, they couldn't get the votes to stop it. So they canceled the vote.
We're closed. No soup for you. There's no more soup left today. Go home. Everybody go home.
Jim McGovern was like, what's going on? Why are we not having this vote? And he's like, you'll have to submit a parliamentary procedure. He's like, just tell me why we aren't having the click, gavel, gavel, gavel. Everybody leave. We're going home for vacation. So they weren't able to vote on a war powers resolution. They weren't in the Senate able to vote to fund ICE and Customs and Border Protection with their budget reconciliation bill. So we'll see what happens. While I think Republicans do fall in line a lot, there's at least a couple of senators that are now just going rogue because that's what happens. You grow a spine when you don't have to run for office.
When you've been
again.
taken out, when you've been
Trump.
Right. When you got the Joe Pesci treatment in the basement one day by Donald Trump, which is happening like all over the place. Yeah, that doesn't make friends, Mr. President. That doesn't secure allies whose votes you need on stuff. So yeah, it's incredible. It's kind of like, in a weird way, it's kind of the domestic version of, I don't know, provoking a pointless war with Iran for the sole purpose of convincing them that they can now hold the entire world hostage with the Straits of Hormuz. But I digress. I don't want to get into it.
Did you see that the plan was actually to put in Ahmadinejad? Did you see that story from the New York Times? I'm like, my God, what? It was Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump, but then they accidentally injured him. And he's like, I'm out. I'm not part of your plan anymore. And so that's when the Khomeini's son took over the regime. And they were like, oops. Oh, and the strait is closed and we can't open it. Darn.
Yeah.
It's just, oh my God, just incompetence from top to bottom.
Unbelievable.
Ahmadinejad.
You know what? I'm sorry. It's totally believable.
It is.
It's been believable all along. Yeah.
You're right. This next story that we're going to cover, though, is actually kind of unbelievable. I can't believe this happened, but we'll talk about that right after this quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. All right. This next one comes from Politico. I don't know what else to say about it. Let's just dive in.
Wow. Just wow.
This one, I gotta be honest. This one struck me out of the blue. As you know, I am far away this week. I'm on the other side of the world, and don't tell anyone. I'm in Sydney, Australia right now, which is super cool. But I read this. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Anyway, a former Justice Department prosecutor has been charged with sending herself copies of an unreleased volume of, you got it, Special Counsel Jack Smith's report on his investigation into President Donald Trump. Her name is Carmen Lineberger. Am I getting that right, Allison, or Lindberger?
I haven't heard her name pronounced, so I assume it's Lineberger.
Okay, Lineberger, it is, 62 years old, entered a not guilty plea to 4 charges related to stealing and concealing government records in federal court in West Palm Beach, Florida on Wednesday. She was released on her own recognizance, court records show.
So get this. The indictment says Lineberger, who was the managing assistant U.S. attorney in Fort Pierce, Florida, received a copy of the restricted Smith report volume by email last year and then sent it and other internal DOJ messages to her personal Hotmail and Gmail accounts. U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon has barred public release of that volume. Remember, you can't send it outside of the Department of Justice.
That's right.
Which discusses his investigation, Jack Smith's investigation, into the presence of classified documents. More than just the presence of classified documents, the retention and the obstruction of
the mishandling, all that. All those espionage acts, yes.
Right, 42 counts, man. Now, an attorney for Lineberger, Tama Kudman, did not respond to requests for comment.
The indictment returned Tuesday says Lineberger sought to cover her tracks by using the file names, quote, chocolate_cake_recipe.pdf and bunt_cake_recipe.pdf for the internal government records she moved to her personal accounts. Every spy knows if you put cake in the file name, no one will ever know what's in there. Okay, however, the charges and a Justice Department press release don't make any claims about why Lineberger moved the documents to her private emails. The indictment also doesn't provide details of what, besides the report, was in the emails and documents she moved to personal accounts.
Interesting. You got to prove intent, right? We'll see what happens.
You do.
There.
Maybe she comes back and says, you know what? The DOJ systems are so bad. I just sent them to my personal Hotmail account, which is much better.
Much more secure.
So get my work done. Could happen.
Boy, it's not classified.
Nope.
Anyway, Lineberger faces 1 felony count of obstruction of justice, for calling it cake, 1 felony count of concealing government records, calling it bunt cake, and 2 misdemeanor counts of stealing government property valued at under $1,000. The maximum sentence, if convicted on all charges, is 25 years in prison. Although federal defendants typically receive significantly shorter terms under federal sentencing guidelines, especially first-time offenders with no criminal history. The case is being handled by prosecutors from the Northern District of Florida, likely because Lineberger's ties to people in the U.S. Attorney's Office for Southern Florida could create a conflict of interest.
Because they've all had her bunt cake. So, they can't... You can't sit in judgment of someone whose cake you've eaten.
There's a hole in this cake.
Okay. Kash Patel, of course, any absurd story these days also includes that gentleman. Kash Patel posted on Twitter about it, saying, quote, "This afternoon, a former managing assistant U.S. attorney who supported Jack Smith's politicized investigation of President Trump has been charged with stealing the confidential investigation documents. Carmen Lineberger allegedly emailed the confidential material to her own personal email, disguising them as dessert recipes to conceal them from record searches. Lineberger is charged with 4 felony counts in the indictment. This FBI will not hesitate to bring to account those who violated the trust of the American public in an investigation that should have never been brought to begin with." Close quote.
It's interesting. I wonder if Kash Patel has any interest in what's in Volume 2 of that report, given that he's in Volume 2 of Jack Smith's final report. Back in January of 2025, senators demanded information from Volume 2 when they were considering the nomination of Kash Patel as FBI director. In a letter to the DOJ, they demanded Mr. Patel's grand jury testimony as part of the department's investigation of Trump and other defendants regarding the president's unlawful retention of classified documents, and any and all sections of Volume 2 of the final report of the special counsel's investigations and prosecutions submitted on January 7th, 2025 by special counsel Jack Smith to the Attorney General that refer to or pertain to Mr. Patel's testimony or actions.
Special counsel Jack Smith's team issued subpoenas to Verizon Communications for Patel's communications at the time when they were investigating whether President Donald Trump had interfered with the 2020 election and had hidden classified documents at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. During the dispute over presidential records, Patel was designated by Trump to be his representative to NARA, that's the National Archives and Records Administration. He publicly asserted that Trump had issued orders declassifying the materials at Mar-a-Lago, a claim he repeated during his 2022 grand jury testimony in the documents case, but a claim that was never, ever proven or substantiated by a single shred of evidence. I'm adding that to the paragraph here, but
claim, or you could call it a lie.
Yeah. A lie based on mistruths is, that's what a lie is.
Yeah, and that one's defense was never used. We talked about that when we saw the defenses that were put forth by Trump and Nauta and De Oliveira. Like they weren't trying to say that he declassified these things.
That was even too much for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not for Patel, who now has indicted somebody who was a potential leak of these documents. But I will say this, I'm very pleased that there are copies out there besides like the one that is, in a burn bag up in Kash Patel's office and the one that Judge Cannon has. So we're still following the story too about the Knight Institute at Columbia University's request to release Volume 2 of the report now that the charges have been dismissed against Nauta and De Oliveira, that was the reason, the justification that Eileen Cannon refused to allow the report to be released.
Right.
But anyway, I think it'd be interesting to see how this case plays out. We'll definitely follow it because I think it's fascinating. Like you said, it just out of bolt from the blue. Cake recipe lady stealing Jack Smith's Volume 2.
Send
it to us.
Something like this happens. You're like, oh my God, how close were we? Were we close? Could we have been the next email recipients? I get so many crazy emails from people. I would gladly taken one from Carol Lineberger. Seems like a nice person.
I went back through all my emails and signals to see if I'd gotten any bundt cake or chocolate cake recipes, and I have not. So
that's so disappointing.
I know.
Oh.
We were that close.
That close.
We want that report. Now, in a related story from Politico, a federal judge has ordered aides to Trump to continue to observe the requirements of the Presidential Records Act, despite a Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel opinion that found the law unconstitutional and how it unconstitutionally intrudes on presidential power. Okay. In a ruling Wednesday, U.S. District Judge John Bates concluded the 1978 statute is likely constitutional and granted a preliminary injunction that essentially nullifies the opinion issued last month by the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel. So that's good news.
Yes. The original public meaning of the text of the Constitution, canons of interpretation, Supreme Court precedent, general principles of property law, and almost 50 years of practice confirm that Congress has the enumerated power to regulate presidential records under the Constitution's property clause, Bates wrote.
He
covered the whole horizon there of possible buttresses to this statute. Bates, a George W. Bush appointee, faulted the OLC opinion for relying on a, quote, stark misreading of the Supreme Court precedent. That is nerdy lawyer speak for you effed up, boys. That is a
really
pretty
bad.
Yes. When a federal judge accuses your interpretation as a stark misreading. He also rejected the Justice Department's arguments that the law is unconstitutional because presidential papers were considered personal property of the president until the 1970s.
Yeah, until the law that's totally constitutional.
The law came along and changed that. Oh, boy.
But before that, it wasn't the law. Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
You also used to be able to kill someone for stealing your horse. Yeah. That's not allowed anymore either. I mean, I don't know what to tell you guys. Things change. It just, over time, we grow, we learn as human beings. We try to get a little bit better and things change. Anyways.
My goodness.
He also noted that the Trump administration observed the law without objection during his first term. Well,
yeah, why would you follow it for 4 years if it were so unconstitutional? Right.
Yeah.
My goodness. All right, everybody. We have a pretty significant hit me in the head with a bat segment this week. It harkens back to, do you remember when Comey was indicted the first time and they were going through grand jury transcripts as part of a vindictive and selective prosecution claim? And found that apparently Lindsay Halligan, who'd never appeared before a grand jury, got a no true bill on 3 counts, but then just erased the first one and then signed it like she got a true bill on the second 2 and didn't tell anybody. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like that on steroids. What happened in this case. And we're going to talk about it after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back. It's time for a little hit me in the head with a bat.
Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat. Hit me in the head with a bat.
Which is our segment going over the presumption of regularity. This one's a doozy, Andy. It's from CBS. Federal prosecutors in Chicago have dismissed all remaining charges against the 4 remaining members of the so-called Broadview 6, a group of protesters who were arrested outside a U.S. ICE facility in Broadview, Chicago last fall. Defense attorneys and prosecutors were forced to drop the case because of significant errors in the grand jury process.
Whoops.
Yep.
U.S. Attorney Andrew McCabe said during a Thursday afternoon hearing that the decision to dismiss charges was due to improper handling of the grand jury proceedings by the lead prosecutor in the case. A rare federal trial for misdemeanor charges that had been scheduled to begin next week was canceled after prosecutors agreed to dismiss the charges with prejudice, meaning they cannot be refiled. Boutros announced the decision to dismiss the remaining charges in court following a closed-door meeting over redacted grand jury transcripts. He told the U.S. District Judge April Perry he was unaware until recently of the alleged misconduct, including a prosecutor meeting with a grand juror outside of proceedings and other jurors who disagreed with the case being dismissed and prevented from participating. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Boutros did not dispute the allegations, saying the conduct was upsetting and the reason the case was being dismissed. Upsetting.
That's upsetting.
I'm upset and I was not even in the case. My God. I mean, what is going on here? Hit me in the head with a bat right now.
Yeah, that's why we call it hit me in the head with a bat.
Mm-hmm.
During a closed-door hearing on the redacted grand jury transcripts, Perry told federal prosecutors she was incredibly shocked. That is strong language for a judge.
Mm-hmm.
incredibly shocked by the redactions that were made, according to a transcript of the hearing that was made public Thursday evening. I have read hundreds, if not thousands, of grand jury transcripts involving prosecutors who are the most junior of prosecutors to several U.S. attorneys who appeared before the grand jury. I have never seen the types of prosecutorial behavior before a grand jury that I saw in those transcripts.
In that sealed hearing, Perry summarized several issues she said jumped out at her immediately and glaringly upon reading the full grand jury transcript. The first of those concerns, according to the judge, was improper prosecutorial vouching, in which an assistant U.S. attorney put her personal credibility and trustworthiness on the line in support of the charges, Perry said. So I guess that's like going in and saying, trust me, this is the worst thing you're ever going to see. You should indict it, sort of thing. Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
The same prosecutor also apparently excused grand jurors, quote, who disagreed with the government's case when presented with it during the first of 3 sessions, asking them to, quote, not partake in the second hearing, the judge said. So let's just get rid of the no votes and stack the room with just the yeses, I guess.
That's insane. Now, Judge Perry said she understood from the transcripts that there had been improper prosecutorial communications of a substantive nature with the grand jurors outside the grand jury room. That's the prosecutor talking to the grand jurors outside the grand jury room. Substantive.
Wow.
Communications. Ultimately, it took 3 grand jury sessions to get an indictment. The first sessions resulted in a no bill, meaning grand jurors moved to not press charges. Now, the second, according to the record of Thursday's closed-door hearing, ended abruptly in the middle of testimony from a U.S. ICE agent at the center of the incident.
Perry said it was problematic that it appeared prosecutors redacted the transcripts in an attempt to conceal what happened during the grand jury proceedings. Problematic? Say it's fire-worthy. I mean, like, wow. Quote, mistakes happen. They happen to all of us. But as I tell my children, you own it, you admit to it, you apologize for it, and you move on. What you do not do is hide it. So that's a quote from the judge. Defense counsel Parente said during the grand jury sessions, prosecutors used vouching, which he called a 101 no-no for any prosecutor, kicked out grand jury members who disagreed with them, did not disclose that a no true bill, which indicates no indictment, had been returned to either the defense or the public. Parente also said that after receiving the no true bill from one grand jury, they represented their case after excluding grand jurors who disagreed with them. The grand jury then returned a true bill to indict the Broadview 6.
Parente also said that while Judge Perry thought only 30 lines of the transcript had been redacted to hide all that, prosecutors actually left out entire pages and never informed her. Quote, we all took the government attorney's word on a great many things, Judge Perry said. I, at the time, was operating on a presumption of regular grand jury proceedings, which these were very clearly not. So based upon what I've seen in the grand jury transcripts, the calculus has changed, and it has changed considerably. Perry told prosecutors that the trust she normally extended to them has been broken by their previous redactions of the grand jury transcripts.
Parente said he will make a motion for sanctions for their clients so they can get their legal fees covered. In any hearings over those sanctions, he expects prosecutors to testify in open court regarding their conduct, and the defense will be able to cross-examine them. He also said they plan to file a claim with the Department of Justice's new Anti-weaponization fund, the 1776 fund, for financial relief for their clients.
So as they say in this story, the transcripts of the closed-door hearing were released. And here's another choice quote from the judge on that. She says to the defense, you're entitled to a briefing and perhaps a hearing on vindictive prosecution should you choose to raise it. And she also raised the possibility, fortunately and thankfully, of sanctions and possible ethics violations for prosecutorial misconduct.
Man, I hope so. Like, where's the bar complaint against these attorneys?
I mean, to just kick people out who voted against you, to have ex parte communications in the hallway with grand jurors outside the grand jury room, to bring in new people, to go vote 3 times on it, to not tell anyone that you had a no true bill, when I believe there's a row. This is in D.C. Boasberg is somebody has set up a rule saying you have to tell me of all of no true bills. Remember, but this is Chicago. The Broadview 6 included congressional candidate Kat Abu-Ghazaleh, right, a 45th Ward guy, and so. I'm very, very thankful. Congratulations to Kat and the other defendants for having the rest of their misdemeanor charges dismissed, because the original felony was dismissed because of this grand jury stuff. But the defense attorneys, Parente, were like, Judge, I think that what happened in the grand jury room taints the whole case. And that's when Judge Perry asked for the unredacted transcripts.
And had she not, we would not know any of this.
Right.
I mean, the fact that they gave her quote unquote redacted transcripts, which were missing pages, that's not a redaction. That's just a falsification of the grand jury process. Like, they didn't want to have to explain why additional entire pages were entirely blacked out. So they just leave those off the pile. I mean, unbelievable. And, you think about if this had happened in the context of a civil lawsuit, like let's say a civil suit went to a jury and one of the lawyers on one of the sides, was having these improper conversations with jurors outside of the courtroom. Let's just say that would absolutely get the case dismissed and the lawyer would be brought up on bar charges. Here, we're talking about somebody who did that and other bad things in an effort to convict someone of a crime. It's so much more severe. It's so much more important.
Yeah.
I'm just stunned. This is like this whole, what we refer to as the hit me in the head with a bat segment, is just exposing all of this craziness that's going on around the country. But this is like full blown, like bumping up against criminal activity, I believe. Yeah.
And I thought Lindsay Halligan was bad in the Comey case, but this is pretty unbelievable. No, believable.
Nuts.
It is believable.
It's totally believable. Yeah.
We'll keep an eye on some sanctions motions. I know that they're looking to file some. Also probably not a good idea to go after Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. She's the girlfriend of the head of The Onion. Keep an eye on The Onion in the coming days. Massive headlines there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, this is unbelievable, but also very believable conduct from this particular Department of Justice. And I think it speaks to, this was, what did you say? This was only the second time this person had been in a grand jury room. So it speaks to the massive brain drain at the Department of Justice that has been occurring, and then them trying to, put out ads on Craigslist for assistant U.S. attorneys.
And if that's the explanation to this, there was no intent to do anything wrong, that it was just like the worst form of rank incompetence we've ever seen from a DOJ lawyer, which I don't believe that's the case. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, then that's on the U.S. attorney. If the U.S. attorney is putting lawyers in front of grand juries who are so incompetent that they are undermining the entire system, like, that U.S. attorney should be fired.
Uh-huh.
You can't, as the leader of an organization, you can't fail to train, fail to guide, fail to instruct your employees and then send them out to wreak havoc around the world or in your backyard or whatever and not be held accountable for it. It's outrageous.
Yeah, outrageous for sure. And the judge was like, well, glad I took a look. But before anything could go down, because the judge was like, we could be looking at vindictive and selective. You should definitely check that out.
Yeah.
But that's when the prosecutors were like, no, we drop all the charges. We're dropping all the charges. Drop the charges. We don't need to bring them with prejudice. It's cool. Slowly back away into the shrubbery like Homer Simpson. Anyway.
Send that guy a fruit basket. It's all going to be fine. No.
Sorry about that. We didn't realize. We didn't know. Had I known. Okay.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, everybody, it's time for some listener questions. If you have a question you'd like to send in to us, I think we have time for one today. Yep. You can do so by clicking on the link in the show notes and filling out the form, and it'll send your questions to us. What do we have today, Andy?
All right. So the first one is just a little bit of a shout out, clearing up some business from last week. Last week I had tons of people wrote in wanting to know where they could access the list of the infamous Trump acronyms, the nacho, taco, nacho, and everything else. Many people wrote in today and pointed out the source of that list, which is actually a Substack called Shades of Greaves. And Greaves is Greaves. It's on Substack. And this guy named, I think his name is Carlos Greaves. He's a former electrical engineer, and he's now become a writer, and he wants to write comedy or something along those lines. But jump over to Shades of Greaves, and he had a post on May 5th that has the entire list, which he basically
Cinco de Mayo.
wrote up. Yeah. So it's pretty funny. Throw him a subscribe while you're over there, and you can gorge yourself on all that taco and nacho stuff.
Now I want tacos.
Yeah. Okay. So lots of people wrote in questions about the slush fund, and we really covered that, I think, pretty extensively here. So I opted to go with something that tags onto this last story that we just did, and because it gives us an opportunity to show you like just how far this story is from normal. So this one comes to us from CC. CC says, Allison and Andy, thank you so much for everything you're doing. I have a lot of MAGA relatives, and listening to your show with all the background data has really helped me push back on a lot of the narratives they are hearing. Hopeful that minds will be changed. My question, in the presidential immunity ruling, I think Alito made the comment that you can indict a ham sandwich.
He did.
I think he did. He definitely did not invent that.
In the oral arguments, he said it, I think.
That's right. So with all the information coming out about the Broadway 6, this appears to be somewhat true. I mean, if you rig the grand jury and then lie to them, it does appear that you can get an indictment. How often do you think this will be happening now? Well, let's remember.
If I got indicted by this administration, I'd be like, we need to check the grand jury transcripts just based on Lindsay Halligan and based on Boutros
For real,
in the Broadview
right?
6.
Yeah. So let's remember that in ye olden days that we like to refer to as normal times, even under totally lawful, appropriate, circumstances, the grand jury still is very, very much in the prosecutor's corner, because the prosecutors can present whatever evidence they want, and they can not present evidence that makes the case look weak. They can they can put in handpick just a few witnesses. There is no examination of witnesses. There's no attorney in the room who represents the target or the soon-to-be defendant in the case. So it is a system that greatly favors the prosecution. The burden for bringing back an indictment is very low. It is simply probable cause. So, and all that is how the system was designed and how it functions normally. What you're seeing now is a massive departure from that. Many U.S. attorneys and assistant U.S. attorneys are failing, even though they are so advantaged in front of a grand jury. They're failing to get indictments in many of these cases that we talk about every week, because the cases are so terrible, and many of them are based on poor, if any, evidence. Sometimes we have seen situations where agents have testified falsely or incorrectly, all kinds of things that are undermining even this incredible advantage that prosecutors have. So all we have to do is get back to a time when assistant U.S. attorneys are just doing their jobs the way they always did. They still had many of the better hand, the better cards in their hand. And with a better U.S. attorney and a better attorney general and good recruiting and training and retention of quality assistant U.S. attorneys across the country, you're going to see this kind of nonsense go away, because that's the way it always was. That's what people who care about justice and care about the oath they've taken to the country and believe in the Department of Justice, that's what they will do. How do we know this? Because that's what they did until this administration.
Yeah, people who can experience shame and embarrassment.
Right, who don't want to lose their licenses, who don't want to have cases fail in front of the grand jury. That's
the thing here, right? Is because the DOJ used to care about their conviction record. They used to care. There was shame attached to losing a case,
right?
Or to having to getting a no true bill return, and that shame is now gone. It is shameless now, and as evidenced by Janine Pirro, I don't care about. I'll take a no true bill. I'll take a not guilty verdict. Yeah. I'm going to bring all the crimes. She just doesn't care. There's no shame in being a complete and total abject loser. And, the only thing standing in the breach, and Attorney General Todd Blanche and former Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, former Attorney General Pam Bondi knew this, is that these lawyers want to keep their law licenses, which is why they filed this memo saying, no, the DOJ bar associations shouldn't be, the DOJ can intervene into bar association. We could take care of ourselves. We could investigate our own. And so they know that the only thing standing in between indicting a ham sandwich every day of the week is that these folks, they don't have shame, but they might want to keep their law license. And so they're trying to get around that as well.
Yeah. And let's be clear. This all comes back to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump. This is what happens when the executive, the president and the executive branch, the leader of the executive branch, puts unremitting pressure on an agency, in this case, the Department of Justice, not to follow the law, not to follow the facts, but to do what he wants for whatever reason. Eventually, the agency will break and it will start complying with that pressure because it's inevitable. And that's where we are now. The administration wanted Kilmar Ábrego García deported, even though a federal judge had issued an order years before or months before, whatever it was, saying he could not be deported to his home country. They didn't care. The president doesn't care. The White House doesn't care. They just wanted it done. And so DOJ went along with it and they let those planes go without demanding that they come back.
They ignored the court order to turn them around.
That's just one example. And now
they ignored the Supreme Court order to return Ábrego García, or at least to tell the courts what steps you've taken to effectuate his return to the United States after being wrongfully deported.
I worked with many, many, many U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys on cases, and not one of them that I worked with. Some of them I loved, others I didn't like. Some you get along with, some you don't. That's totally fine. Not one of them did I ever think would have brought a case in front of a grand jury that they didn't believe was a good, solid, sound case that could win. Because they had standards and they would just look at you and say, no, you're not there yet. You're not ready yet. Go out and get me more evidence. Go out and flip another witness. Go out.
Well, that's a rule. Isn't that a rule in the book?
Yeah,
that you
of
have
course.
to believe that you can, obtain and then maintain a conviction.
That's right. That's the policy in DOJ. And these are all super competitive, like very aggressive prosecutors. They want to make cases too, but they're not going to do them at the expense of the law, at the expense of the standard, at the expense of their own reputations.
Because you want
That's
the win
gone
rate
now.
So that you could go out and hang a shingle and be like, I didn't lose 8 out of 10 cases when I was a U.S. attorney or assistant in AUSA. But I'll take them. I don't care. She doesn't care. Of course she doesn't care. She just goes back to her Fox News job when she's done.
I gotta make the president happy. I mean, good luck with that. See how well that's gone for every other human being that's trying to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
there's room for you under the bus too, Janine.
Heck yeah.
Another quick note before we get out of here. Just got this. Tulsi Gabbard is resigning.
I saw that.
ODNI. Don't have too much information on this yet about why. I've read somewhere that her husband has an illness and she's trying to go be with him. I was assuming she was about to be fired anyway because of her poor performance on the Hill and her testimony and her. She's anti-war in Iran and probably, but we'll get more information. And when we have more information, we'll report it out to you on that.
Yeah, that's what she put in her resignation letter to Trump, which I read a couple hours ago. And if that's the case, like, I wish her husband nothing but the best. She says he's been diagnosed with some extremely rare form of bone cancer. And that's, nobody wants that for anyone. I am surprised that she's made it as long as she has because her tenure has been rocky, to say the least. But anyway, that's that.
All right, everybody. Again, if you have a question, you want to send it in to us, there's a link in the show notes for you to click on, and then it'll take you to a form you can fill out to submit your questions to us. We really appreciate it. Send them all, and we will see you next week. And as we always say, who knows what could happen between now and then, but I guarantee you it'll be enough to fill an hour.
Oh, hell yeah.
We'll talk then.
It always is.
Anyway, thank you so much, everybody. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Andy McCabe.
Unjustified is written and executive produced by Allison Gill, with additional research and analysis by Andrew McCabe. Sound design and editing is by Molly Hockey, with art and web design by Joel Reeder at Moxie Design Studios. The theme music for Unjustified is written and performed by Ben Folds, and the show is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned independent podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, please visit mswmedia.com.